It's time for 41 is the Mic, a weekly Chiefs podcast with Nick Jacobs of KSHB 41 and Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. 41 is the Mic starts now.
Welcome, everyone, to another OTA edition of 41 is the Mic. I am Matt Derrick from Chiefs Digest alongside renowned spider enthusiast Nick Jacobs from KSHB 41.
We don't talk about spiders, Matt, okay? I know you guys have been obsessed about it all week, but I moved on with my life away from the spider, who I haven't seen. No, don't see him anywhere.
Everybody was excited to know about an update about the spider, so.
Well, sorry. Not going to happen. Not going to do it.
Your colleague, Mick Schaefer, even suggested that we should, refer to, the hardcore fans, like the 92 percenters, as the spiders. Yay or nay?
I don't understand why we would refer to him as that. But all right.
Well, we are here to talk about OTAs, and so let's get into it, Nick. And we're gonna do this in kind of try to have a fun way this week. We're gonna go through it the way that Nick and I see OTAs and watch it, because we get the very exciting part, Nick, where we stand outside of a fence waiting for a horn to blow that allows us to come into practice.
Yeah, once you hear their air horn, that's when you know you can go in and set up.
You get to go in and set up, and that there, like this week in particular, and it's different for every practice, but this one, it was basically a 16-minute warm-up stretch period, and that's a conditioning period. The most active thing for it to watch, Nick, is you've got, running backs, receivers, maybe a corner or two, defensive back or two, who are receiving kicks from the jugs machine. Dave Tobe's working with them. They'll do some tricky things every once in a while to just kind of test guys. But everybody else, for the most part, is just, in stretch lines, warming up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, at that point, I'm already set up with the sticks and camera, and I'm shooting whenever we get there. And they tell us where we can be at this week based on, aligning with where the players are in the practice fields and making sure we're safe distance. So if somebody comes over that we don't cause them an injury with the tripod, which, I'm all about. I'm very all about. I don't want any of those players to get hurt or have their dreams torn up because of that. So, yeah, I mean, we're set up. So Matt Foster and I this past week were both set up. He shot field number 1 with primarily offense, and then I got field number 2 with defense. So we had 2 cameras out there both shooting at the same time. We got a lot of quality time to shoot last week and this week. So, I mean, we made sure to take full advantage of it to get as much video as possible. So, yeah, I mean, you're identifying certain guys to see who you potentially want to get. And number 1 for Matt and I was we wanted to get Rashee Rice. So we got a lot of video of him because this is the first time we'd seen him since the injury. And then, we wanted to keep tabs on what Josh Simmons is up to. Then we want to get some cornerbacks, defensive backs, since Dave Merritt was talking that day. And then I was going to go try to get some of the defensive linemen in the far off field since we had a little bit more time to do it. If you're the only camera shooting, you got to be very efficient and effective in terms of what you want to get shots of. So, we had a little bit more room and a little bit more opportunity to kind of focus on specific things instead of trying to get as much video as possible of a handful of things that, you normally have to do if you're solo shooting.
Well, and speaking of solo shooter, that's this guy right here. Because during that period, I have 2 tasks. One is that I'm trying to get any video or photos that I can and I need. And, for our members over on the Chiefs Digest YouTube side, if you're a member, you can go watch all the video I shot last week with my phone. And that's the drawback that I have of not being a professional videographer of any sort, is I'm shooting it with my iPhone, which is nice, but you guys have like $10,000 lenses that can shoot, nice athletic video from the 120 yards away that we are sometimes from people. So I get decent video of the wide receivers since, when they come over after the stretch period and start doing individual drills, we get a little bit of the receivers. That's nice, but otherwise a little bit of the return period that's in my range. But anything that's beyond that, it starts to look a little bit like it's been, smuggled out of Pakistan or something. I mean, it's not the greatest of quality, but hopefully at that point I have managed to check off all 91 players as to whether or not they are in attendance or not, because that's the other thing I've got to do during that period. And even then, chasing down all 91 guys, I mean, at least most of them are in position groups up until individual. You even stretch, they're in position groups, but still, especially, when you get the offensive and defensive line guys, since we're at one end of the field beyond the end zone, and like the defensive and offensive lines are standing on the goal line at the other end of the end zone. We're like 130 yards away, and they've got like 2 or 3 lines in front of them. So some guys can hide, Nick. It makes it a little difficult.
Yeah, and yeah. So and Matt's talking about during the stretch period because they're on 2 different fields during the individual drills.
Yeah. And I guess to note here what we did and did not see this week. We saw, you mentioned Rashee Rice. Jawan Taylor was also back at practice this week. Did not see Trey Smith nor Hollywood Brown. Now, I know Hollywood has been at OTAs, some other practices. He just has not been in attendance at any of the ones that the media has been open to. Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt were also out this week. Travis Kelce, Ethan Driscoll's been out. Jalen Moore and Jared Wiley were on the sidelines this week, attending practice but watching. And then Cam Jones and Trey Watson, tight end, were a couple of the 2 new ones that were not in attendance this week at least. You mentioned a little bit about Rashee and about Jawan too. Did anything that you saw from them today that was of interest to you, or today, Wednesday, that was of interest to you?
Yeah. Well, with Rice, here's where 2 points on it. First is it's good that he didn't have a sleeve or he didn't have anything supporting the knee on that front. So that was a welcome sight on that end. So I mean that's good to see on that front. That was very encouraging. But I do want to caution people and say to them, I know I said to you a couple of times, I'm like, he's not fully where he was in that Baltimore game yet. That's not a bad thing. It's just like, it's what people need to understand is when people have surgery, there can be some scar tissue, there can be swelling for a while, and it just takes a while for the body to just reacclimate, depending on, just their response to what they're either doing physical therapy wise or what they got going on. And I mean, he's got a very good training staff that's working with him and that can help him be able to get to his peak performance of where that may be. But there's just some realities that it just can take some time to get back to who a guy was before that, whether, you are doing physical therapy or rehab or whatever you may be doing. It's just going to take time to be comfortable and confident overall. But from an explosive perspective, I think he's just a little tick behind where he was a little bit, not something that's going to hinder him or anything, but I just don't want people to think that he's 100% going to be exactly the same player who he was right before. And they get to that point and they're like, why isn't he exactly that way? I just don't want people to kind of put lofty expectations that it's just how, that it's just going to come back and just be the same it was before. So I hope it gets to that point for him, and he might be close, and he might be there by camp. He might be there by the regular season. But I think him being out there and physically doing what he did and running the routes he did and everything combined, he's much further along than what I was expecting or anticipating. So from that front, I mean, you can tell he's put in serious work to be able to be even in the ballpark, if not even better than what some guys never make it back to who they were before. So I remember Spencer Ware wasn't the same guy ever again after having somewhat kind of similar injury in Seattle.
Yeah, and and Andy Reid made this point, and some others have as well. Even though this was not an ACL that he suffered, the recovery period was going to be very similar to an ACL, and he is just 8 months out. I mean, obviously, we've seen some guys coming back even faster, in the 6 to 9 months period, rather than the year that it used to be. And every knee and every injury and every person is different. But you talk about that confidence and comfort. I go back to what I think is just absolutely a classic case of that last year with Najee Johnson in training camp and kind of the, in and out and portion of that. That was his first time got back, playing football since he really hadn't been doing anything during OTAs. He's out there, and we got to see him kind of go through that process in real time. That I think it's hard for the player to have to do that in front of the fans and to see all that. But when you're coming back from an injury, it takes a while before you trust it. You're going to have tweaks that you're like, all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, did I just tear this thing up again? Have I had a setback? And the trainers are going to look at it, and if you've got some swelling there, then they're going to say, hey, we're going to back this off. So I would fully expect that between now and maybe in the training camp that Rashee Rice is going to have that. He might have some days that maybe they hold him out or they hold him back because he's had some swelling or he's got some discomfort. So the good thing is that he still has time. I mean, there's plenty of recovery time before the beginning of the season, but the fact that he's on the field, there was some doubt of whether he'd be at this point, that maybe his first, on the field work would be training camp. So the fact that he's where he's at, to me, it's like Josh Simmons. It's a really good sign.
Yep. And then for Juwan Taylor, it was just good to see him out there because I know he had the knee. I think they've publicly talked about the knee at this point. But yeah, just getting that handled, and because if you noticed and you paid attention to the injury report last year, anytime they were going to be indoors on turf, he always had the knee on the injury report, and I know that was something he's dealing with last year, and so you just kind of notice that pattern, and so who was out there doing his kick steps? He was out there. He looked completely fine out there. So, but with there not being the true contact in pad form, you're not going to be able to take a ton away. You just see how a person's moving laterally, how they're moving when they kick step, and do they look comfortable after the play? Are they favoring anything? And then I didn't see any of that, so that was encouraging on that front.
Yeah, we haven't heard specifically what was done. It was just some cleanup in that knee. I know that knee was bothering him all of last season. So and it may have even been bothering him a little bit in the 23 season, but it just progressively got worse in 24, and that's why they did the cleanup. And if he can, if it makes him a better player, then you could certainly see a different Juwan Taylor this year. If he's more comfortable and has more. Once again, we go back to the trust and confidence in that knee. So after that, Nick, we get into the individuals, which we started talking a little bit about. That's just basically each position group goes on and they're doing drills, but it's basically just one person. You're not going up against anybody. You're not. I mean, receivers are just catching footballs. Running backs are going through drills. Quarterbacks are throwing the football. I mean, there's not. I mean, it's just basically if you've ever done a football practice, seen a football practice, you've seen them in training camp, just those individual drills.
Yes. So, yeah, that's what it's called, individual.
I don't know. There's much more to say about it.
No, not. So we can continue on with your notes at that point.
You get 10 minutes of that, and then 11:46 into the period that we're really not supposed to talk about, but we can acknowledge that it exists, Nick. It's the group install. And I say why we're not allowed to discuss, because with these OTA practices that are closed to the public, there are certain things that are embargoed that we're not allowed to report. Teams, because it's a closed practice, they're allowed to implement their own rules. Every team has different rules, but some are fairly consistent and the same. You can't report depth charts. You can't report, trick plays, anything of that nature. You can't report schemes and formations. So I can't tell you, necessarily, hey, the Chiefs were in 12 personnel and here's who their tight ends were. No, you can't get into any of that.
That didn't happen that day.
You learn a lot, though. I mean, you learn a lot, and a lot of people don't even know when we talk about install what it is. So maybe you want to just kind of explain people what we're talking about there.
So for install, it's just what they're going to run more than likely during team that day, maybe 7-on-7, and what they want them to go through, either from a route combination or what they're going to work through versus what look they're going to see. So for them, they're already putting the plays in the order that they're going to run them during that practice. And they may have done it in a walkthrough that morning. If you go up to training camp, and they may have already done an early walkthrough, or maybe or if I'm miracle, I think at camp the way they do it now is, typically I think they do the walkthrough. I don't remember if they do it before anymore or if they do it later.
Yeah, I think they still do it before.
Because I can't remember sometimes if they do it later that day for the next morning to see if they retain and can kind of. So either way, they have all that, but they still have what Matt's talking about with the install physically on the field that fans get to see. And if you're up at training camp, you clap whenever the receiver catches the 40-yard pass against air, because they scored a touchdown. So that's what that portion of the practice is.
And I mean, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of things you can glean from it. Like I said, there's things that we can't talk about, unfortunately, when it's a closed practice. When you get up to training camp, obviously all bets are off, so everything's on the record. But like I said, there's things you can pick up. And to your point, about what they're working on, this at least what you can say in an observation from these two OTA practices, the one last week, Nick, was exclusively 11 personnel. It was just 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a running back on the field all day long. That was all they were working on. This past weekend, it was 12 personnel. So there was 2 receivers and 2 tight ends and a running back on the field all day long. I mean, so that's the kind of thing that they're working on this time of year. And it's not always necessarily formations, but it can be other parts of the playbook that maybe they're focusing on that day. And, it's important for defense. I think it's probably a lot more important for the offensive side, and Andy Reid structures this. So, he's got an install every single day during OTAs. He's got it during mini camp. He's got them during training camp. So, to him, he counts off every single one of those installs. And I'll tell you this, he can probably tell you exactly who was there and who was not for every single install, because when he talks about injuries or anything like that, and in the past when he's talked about holdouts, he can tell you, like, hey, this guy missed 12 installs, so he's 12 installs behind.
Yeah, well, unfortunate. They'll at least they get their playbook to go through.
All right, we're now 41 minutes into the practice, Nick, and that's when we get our first team session, and it's special teams. And this can rotate. Usually it'll be one thing or another each day. They'll just rotate. It can be kick return that they're focusing on, and then kick coverage. As far as which team's the starters and which one's the backup team or the scout team. Punt return, punt coverage. In this case, they started off with field goal, and specifically they did 2 what they called Mayday plays, and that's about the best specifics that we can get into as far as what they ran that day. But Mayday is just simply last second trying to get onto the field, no timeouts, run a play, get the field goal team off, and get the field goal off before the clock goes off. And in this case, they started with 18 seconds, had the offense on the field, throw a pass, get the field goal team on, and kick it. Looked decent. I mean, they got both the kicks off and made them, Nick, so it worked.
Yeah, and for what I'll say for people at this point, after individuals ends, that's when the cameras are done for the day in terms of shooting video. So I'll go take the camera and sticks outside and or down to the press conference room, and then that's where that portion is done in terms of people that aren't staying to watch all of practice and to observe and write down notes and everything. That's where they're done at that point. But for credentialed media members, watching the rest of the practice is still an option and still open at that point.
Yeah, and that's why you never see in highlight videos from any of us 11 on 11. You never get to see any of that, because the only ones that are shooting that are the Chiefs. So it's closed to everybody else.
Yes.
So,
all right, what's next on your notes?
Next on the notes, after 12 minutes of special teams, which did include some kick return this week, team blitz, Nick. 10 plays of team blitz, and this is always entertaining to me. I mean, it's a period that they do in most practices. The only time they don't do it are on the 10-10-10s, which are a different format of practice. But team blitz is always pretty lively.
Okay, I don't remember at this point what is happening for that. So if you want to go over, I can react to whichever part you're. Yeah, Team Blitz is basic. Got general notes for the rest of this. Yeah, Team Blitz is just it's a 10-play session. In this case, I think it was 6 plays for Mahomes. I think there was 3 for Gardner Minshew, 1 each for the other backups. But it's really
one time it's kind of in these team periods is specifically designed for the defense, but it's the offensive gain is that they get to see the blitzes that the defense is working on. They get to see some different things. So typically in this, there's no rehearsal for this. So the offense doesn't know what blitzes that the defense is going to be working on that day. It's just an opportunity for the defense to test out some of the looks that they're using right now. And it's a kind of a opportunity to push the offense a little bit and make them uncomfortable in a practice. And, it was, I think, the second play of the team blitz that I was notable to me, Nick, because that was a one where Mahomes, like off his back foot, mind you, because Chris Jones was bearing down on him, just lofted a deep shot towards Tyquan Thornton. I mean, it was an incredible throw. It was incomplete. I wasn't sure if Tyquan turned the wrong direction or it was Mahomes that threw it the wrong direction. They were just off on which way the ball was going, so that's why it fell incomplete. But just remind you, Mahomes has got an incredible arm to be able to throw the ball farther than Tyquan Thornton can run off his back foot.
From what I remember on that play, I mean, he put it in a spot where either Thornton was going to be able to track it, run under it, and go get it, or nobody was going to get it because there was two potential defenders in that region or area that could potentially have an interception. So because Mahomes knows their speed, their coverage style, and everything of that nature, he was comfortable in trying to put it in a spot where Thornton could go get it. But from a track perspective, from what I remember, Thornton had to adjust once or twice, and once you have to do that, it can slow you down a little bit, and that's why they were unable to connect. I think the pass was about 4 or 5 yards off to the left in terms of that. But yeah, Mahomes he took a chance, tested out his arm, give his receiver a chance to get an opportunity to track, try to run under it, and make a play off of it.
And the very next play has become what has been the almost identical highlight reel play from Trent McDuffie. Najee Johnson broke up a pass. Trent McDuffie makes a diving interception. It was the second time in 2 practices that we've seen McDuffie make the exact same type of play, make a diving interception off a tipped ball.
Yeah, and Patrick was, if I remember correctly, Patrick was kind of rolling out that way, and he was testing, I believe he was testing something out there from a throw perspective, and instead of trying to take off and scramble, try to make something work. And yeah, like you said, Najee was able to kind of jump, get a hand in there, kind of deflect it up, and then McDuffie dived for the pick.
Yeah, and then there was another one in that session. Leo Chenal, was at least in the ballpark. There was a throw to Jalen Royals, and that was the one. That was the one that I think Royals then kind of came up limping afterwards and left practice after that, but on his own power, going back to the locker room, into the training room. But Leo was downfield in the ballpark. I'm not sure you can really say that he broke up the pass, but he was in the area.
Yeah, I don't have that part on my notes there, so that wasn't one that stood out to me.
All right, I forgot to write down what time that they then moved into 7-on-7, but it would have been about maybe probably more like 12 minutes later. So we can probably say it was about 12:25 when they go into 7-on-7, and 7-on-7 is a little bit of an extended period to see the offense and see what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, since you don't have offensive linemen at that point, obviously a quarterback, that's the worst if they take off running. And 7-on-7, since there's no pressure, and the receivers may have been running for more than 4 seconds at that point, and the defenders may have been covering for more than 4 seconds at that point. So that's where you need to give every person an opportunity to be able to kind of make a throw, make a play, for them to kind of be able to track the ball, be able to adjust to the velocity, and be able to try to make everybody better on the football field at that point.
Yeah, and in this practice, I counted 12 plays in the 7-on-7, just typical format, typical location, and then they go into a red zone version of the 7-on-7 for another 12 plays. And that one, obviously they're in the red zone, so there's more probably what you'd call highlight plays, because there's more scoring plays, legitimate scoring plays. Oftentimes, once a play's kind of, once a receiver kind of catches a ball on a a 7-on-7 in a deep period, I mean, the defense stops. I mean, they're not chasing guys to the goal line trying to force the ball out or anything like that. Red Zone produced a couple of highlights though. I don't know if you have any one specifically in your notes, but I know that like Mac Delaney caught a pass from Gardner Minshew that I thought was pretty impressive, I think, for a touchdown. Jalen Watson broke up a pass and looked pretty good.
So what I'll say about Jalen Watson part, what's kind of funny for the cornerbacks, whether it's team or 7-on-7, is the outside corners have little hand pads on. And I'm not saying this in like a dismissive way, because like for me, when I see the hand pads that they have, for some people you would think of it like, a boxing trainer that has the two little hand pads for them to be able to target where they're punching as a boxer. But whenever I see them, it reminds me of the hand combs that you put on to brush a horse. And so like it looks eerily similar to that, but it could be both those two things. But what the corners do is, since technically they're not, it's the limited and on contact, and you got to have pads on, you got to have, you're either using padded shields or kind of some type of pad. It allows the corners to be able to give the receivers a quick press, but also, since they're inside let's say, a padded gloves on, Steve Spagnuolo was asked about this in the presser, it allows them to they won't grab. So for the corners get something out of it to where they can't just grab the jersey, grab shoulder pad. It allows them to get a good press off the line. It allows the receiver to experience, the press, but also be able to figure out how they want to get the release off of it. So again, it helps everybody get better on both sides of the ball. So the reason I'm saying that is because on Jalen Watson, what he kept trying to do and what it's kind of turned into a game for the corners is they use it to try to see if they can either get rid of the pad and make a one-handed interception, or do they get rid of the pads to be able to to try to intercept the football. But it's kind of turned into a little game of when do they drop the pad to try to make a play on the football. So it's just kind of been one of those funny things to kind of see in a cool way, in a cool little fun game that actually makes everybody better on that front. And then, there's some that are brave enough that like, I'm going to try to make it while having the pads on. So it's just been an interesting kind of competition to see the corners do on that front. And you get to see it up close from the red zone we were watching there right in front of us.
Yeah, that was the first time when I really noticed it, that they were doing that. And Spagnuolo did mention that it was something that they started using last year, and Trent McDuffie was the one that set the trend, and he started doing it. So then the other corners did. And I mean, it's brilliant now that when you think about it in that way. I mean, and to visualize it, you mentioned for brushing a horse. They also look like the pads that like a boxer in training that whoever they're punching uses on their hands and everything. Maybe just big oven mitts. I don't know what you want to call them, but
they're actually pretty condensed. That's why I talked about the horse comb, is because they're condensed. And the boxing ones from what I remember, aren't as big, but I know that's what Spagnuolo was comparing it to in the press conference, to where like I'm telling you, it's just circular, but it's like hand size. So like it's not big and massive like an oven mitt. It's not like an oven mitt you're taking stuff out of them. It's not that big. It's enough that it's the size of the hand and it just kind of fits over it.
Yeah, and I mean it is. I mean, to me, it is ingenious, because should be a really good way to train corners not to grab and to hold, and obviously that can be an issue for some people. So we'll see if that long term, or that does do some good for some defenders. But you're right; it is absolutely hysterical watching to see how fast Jalen Watson can get those.
And it's not just him anymore. Some of the other guys.
Other guys do it too.
Other guys are starting to do it too. And the Delaney catch, because I remember one right down in red zone work there when we were watching. I can't remember 7-on-7 or team. But it was a shake that I can't remember if it was Delaney, because Delaney had a shake at one point that was impressive to get across the goal line against his defender. And then I know there was another one that I want to say Brainstool had that was really impressive too.
Yeah. And then it was at, let's see, I'm doing, there we go. 12:42, get into 7-on-7, or excuse me, 11-on-11, the last 11-on-11 period. This practice is scheduled to go to 11:20 to 1, and Andy Reid practices pretty much always go on time or ahead of schedule, depending on how quickly guys, make it through plays and everything. So don't always have an Andy Reid practice that goes long. I mean, he's a timely guy, and that the last 11 on 11, unfortunately, we don't get to see the whole thing because PR will typically at that point escort us off the field after the first round of 11 on 11 when the ones are done, because they want us to be in the media room when practice is over so that they can get Andy Reid or whomever the first coach is into the media room immediately, close to 1 o'clock as they can. This time we could have stayed out there, Nick, because they had the ceremony for Dustin Colquitt after practice that we didn't get to see, unfortunately. But because we did leave after the first 11 on 11 period.
No, technically we leave after the second. I
meant like the first rotation in that last 11 on 11, because we only got to see the ones. We didn't get to see Minshew and the backups go through it and everything. There were a couple of highlights though. That first pass that Mahomes had in the 11 on 11 to Xavier Worthy that just dropped absolutely in between Jalen Watson and Brian Cook, that Worthy hauled in. It was a beautiful throw.
So I want to say this is the part where a lot of my notes ended up because they got into a rhythm at this point. Because I know Mahomes had that no-look pass to Robert Tonyan, and to where Tunyan's doing a crosser to where you're looking out on the field to your right side when you're watching. And it's to Mahomes' left because he's, obviously flipped from we're watching Mahomes, in the passing game coming at us. So Mahomes is going out to his rolling out to his right, and then he no looks past to Robert Tonyan. Tonyan was able to catch it. The defenders thought Mahomes was going to his right and found out he wasn't. So he had that, and then there was one where Mahomes' body and momentum is taking him to the right side completely, to the sidelines. He's not there yet. He's in between the hash and the sidelines, and his whole momentum's taking him there. But then he does what he can do because of working with Christensen and working with Bobby, to where he is able to transfer. I don't know how to explain it perfectly, but he's able to transfer the power he's going to need without having the perfect platform to throw it, like most quarterbacks are going to need with their feet apart and have a certain torque in their hips. Mahomes just has ways whenever he's got momentum taking him another way, but he wants to go a different direction. And he figured out a way to create enough torque and get the arm angle and just the way that he tossed the football, the completely opposite, different direction to Worthy on a route 20 yards downfield to the left, and hit him on a dime right in front of it, lead him perfectly with that football. It's in terms of practice, I've seen Mahomes make a couple better throws than that, but what he did right there was just another one of those jaw-dropping throws that if you understand quarterback mechanics and how pretty much 95 to 99% of other quarterbacks that have ever played in the NFL have to do it, he shouldn't be able to do that. Shouldn't be able to transfer power with not having the correct, the footwork, the spacing, not having a proper platform, just all of it combined, and just to be able to kind of transfer the power the way he does. Like it was one of my favorite throws I've ever seen him do, and it's just simply in a practice. Don't get me wrong. He's got a lot of great throws. I still remember the one at Camp Anfield years ago when he's just scrambling out to his left to buy Sammy Watkins time deep, 45 yards downfield, and he just momentum's taking him to the sidelines. He's getting ready to get to the sidelines. He's got 3 defenders closing in on him, and then he just tosses it across the grain and just right to Watkins, who unfortunately had a defender come in and deflect it. But just the effort and the ability, it was on par with that. And so it was such a good throw.
And the one thing, and unless you're on the field and you get to experience this sometime, or your training camp and close enough to experience this, I don't know that you can ever truly appreciate the velocity at which Mahomes throws that football. And we got this opportunity. Yeah, I think it was there in the 7-on-7s in the goal line. And so Mahomes started scrambling because there was nobody open. Sky Moore was going to the outside, trying to break free. Mahomes is rolling that direction, fires the ball. Sky, it was either he was going to catch or nobody was. Sky couldn't get to it. It was just a little bit too far outside. But that ball comes towards us, Nick, and skids on the ground. It hits, I think it was near Todd Lebo and Adam Teicher were the closest ones. And the ball just skids and then crashes into the fence. Yeah. I mean, Nick, I am sure that ball was like 70 miles an hour.
It had velocity to it.
It was at least 60. It was between, I'm sure, 60 to 70 miles an hour.
Because guys, this isn't like a punt, like, where you kind of, like downing it, hitting at the 10 and kind of rolling inside the 5. Like this was a Mahomes fastball and I need you to understand with where we're at from where he threw that football, we're a solid, with where that fence is at, we're a solid probably 30 yards away. Yeah. And the amount of momentum that ball had to get to the back fence and hit it with the thought it did and the way it did. Oh, it was just a nice little reminder that if somebody got hit by it, they were going to have a nice little welt afterwards.
Well, and that's what Adam Teicher said, was that he got hit by a Mahomes pass in the indoor facility up in St. Joe one time. It left a serious welt on his leg.
I believe it, man. Seeing that zip and hearing that thud, you get a nice little reality check.
It's seeing throws like that I'm like, how in the world do these guys catch it? I mean, it just makes you appreciate how good these guys are to be able to catch throws like that, because it is and my other great example of this whole, practice and everything like that, what I thought was one of the best catches was also in this period. But it was when Jake Breedingstool caught the pass over Nick Bolton. And Breedingstool just using his body again, using his long arms to kind of be able to, it was a throw over the middle and kind of a seam route. Nick Bolton had good coverage, but Breedingstool's, got probably 6 inches on Nick Bolton. So he was able to elevate, go over him, reach over Bolton, use his hands, extend to catch the football and bring it in. Every time I see Breedingstool catch a football, it's like he does everything right, Nick. I've been really impressed with him so far.
Yeah, and that was a Mahomes throw on that one, to where Mahomes threw it in what you would call a basket throw. And what Mahomes is doing that is he's trying to drop it in a specific spot to where Breedingstool can be able to box out if he needs to, or if he needs to elevate over, he knows exactly where he needs to elevate over. And so for Breedingstool on that one, he was able to, quote unquote, make the basket for that throw. And Bolton was in good coverage, and Breedingstool's just right there in front of him. He's able to track it and be able to come up with the catch. But there was tight coverage by Bolton. And I know people who are going to be like, oh, that's not impressive because Bolton's not whatever in coverage. I'm just telling you, dude, the touch Mahomes had to put on that throw to put it in the exact spot, the way he had to loft it and to be able to precision pass, put it where it is. And for Breedingstool to understand that and go be able to make that play, like, that was a great job all around. Bolton had good coverage. Breedingstool made a good catch. Mahomes just made an insanely awesome touchback.
Just to kind of wrap up, how not everything goes perfect in a practice like this. This is really funny that this was the 3-play sequence at the beginning of this 11-on-11. You had to throw to Xavier Worthy. We were both talking about just what an incredible throw it was from Mahomes to place it in the exact right spot. You then had to throw to Breedingstool that he hauls in over Bolton. And then the third one, if I'm not mistaken on this one, I think they even stopped the play before it started because somebody was lined up in the wrong spot. And so then they pulled back up, line back up again. And the play, it got it to such a disastrous start that Mahomes just dirted the ball, which you almost never see Patrick Mahomes do. But it just goes to show you, okay, something went dreadfully wrong on that play. And he was just like, we're not doing this. And just dirts the ball at the foot of the running back. It just kind of cracked me up because, usually, you see this and Mahomes will try to make chicken salad out of everything, Nick. But he was like on that one. It was just, no, we're not doing this.
Yeah, and the other thing I need to make sure we mention it was Robert Tonyan Day out at OTAs that day.
Absolutely Robert Tonyan Day.
So he caught passes from pretty much every single quarterback at one point or another in practice, whether it was team 7-on-7, whenever they're doing drills, it didn't matter. I called it Robert Tonyan Day. We actually got custom bobbleheads when we walked in for practice that day to recognize it was Robert Tonyan Day. But no, I mean, I'm not. Here's where I want to temper this, and this is where I want to say, if I'm going with a tight end room right now, it's gonna be Travis Kelce, Noah Gray, and it's gonna be Jake Brandstole and Jared Wiley. That's my tight end room personally. Robert Tonyan had a good day, but he's not the athlete those previous four guys are. So I need to emphasize that and say that. Doesn't mean he can't find a roster spot depending on how injuries go. Doesn't mean he can't be on a practice squad. It's just that guy was maxing out everything he had athletically that day, and he got a lot of catches thrown his way. And, with not having Wiley out there, with Travis Kelce, not attending practice, that gave him an opportunity to have a lot more reps, and he got a lot more targets for whatever reason they were working on, with the offense that week. So I do want to recognize that he had a very big day, and I am going to cherish the pretend bobblehead we never got forever. But I'm just saying, like, he worked with every quarterback. Here's the thing I want people to take away from something like this: when a guy works with multiple quarterbacks and they make all the catches, like, that's a good thing, because quarterbacks have different velocities on throws. They have different spots where they place it, and they have to adjust to that player's level of speed. So all that combined, for a guy to be able to work with multiple quarterbacks, that is always a good sign. That is something I hope people take from that. And then the other thing I got to mention yet again is going to be Gardner Minshew, who was out there for Minshew Mania. We got fake T-shirts that said Minshew Mania. Very exciting. No, I'm just kidding. We did not. But like, in terms of backup quarterbacks, like, he's got such good touch, and he's got really good zip, and he understands where the loft angle needs to be on a throw, where to place it correctly. He's got plenty of reps and experience to where, like, I think this offense showcases a lot of who he is as a quarterback, and I think it was incredibly smart for him to sign here and to be a part of this. And I hope he continues to want to be here down the road in years to come if he continues to perform at this level OTA minicamp wise. I'm sure he wants to start like most quarterbacks do, but I'm saying him being able to be here for a handful of years, I think, would really help his career no matter what, in terms of what he can do mechanically because of the coaching that he could get here.
Yeah, I mean, so far from what I've seen, I mean, Gardner Minshew, he looks like just the most the best fit for this offense as a backup quarterback that they've had in a while. Because I know Andy Reid always wants to protect his quarterbacks, and he says, hey, when Matt Moore, Chad Henne would come in, Blaine Gabbert, hey, there's you don't have to change the offense. You did have to change the offense. Minshew, I don't think you'd have to change the offense.
No,
I mean, he's not going to be able to make every throw that Mahomes does, because nobody can make some of the throws that Mahomes makes. But if you're just talking about the standard throws in this offense that you need to run it, Minshew can make them. I mean, he's got the arm to stretch the field. He looks efficient. He looks, accurate. I mean, there seems to be a lot to like so far. And I keep saying, and I mean, if the Chiefs want to, get Mahomes back to the gunslinger, deep throwing the ball down the field kind of guy, Minshew, I think, is going to be a really good voice to have in that quarterback room, because Gardner Minshew isn't going to be saying, hey, you know what, Patrick, you should have checked the ball down here. Minshew is going to be, I think, the guy that if Mahomes checks the ball down, Minshew is going to be in the film room saying, why don't you throw it to this guy 30 yards downfield? That's just his mentality. I mean, and having two guys that I think alike is probably going to be good for Mahomes in that quarterback room.
Yeah, and for people that are watching on the YouTube, as I like to call it sometimes, instead of YouTube, I was remoting into our computer at work to start the record for the Royals game, and then I texted our sports department, let them know I started rolling, so we're good to go on that front. So,
see, Nick has to multitask during the 41 is the mic.
Never not working. That's
right.
Mick likes to tell me from the Head and Shoulders Troy Polamalu commercial.
Never not working.
Is there any final thoughts practice-wise you got? Otherwise, we can tap into anything that stood out to you during the press conference.
I was going to say, let's go to the press conferences. I think we've wrapped everything from my side.
How long's the walk going to be? No, I'm just kidding. We're already there. I like this. It's like a DVD chapter. You just hit forward.
Fire away, Nick. What do you?
I made sure this was the first time we got to talk to position coaches and coordinators since the Super Bowl loss. And so there was 3 people I wanted to ask questions to. I was able to ask 2 of them about it. But I feel like a big theme of what we need to know from them when we get those opportunities to talk to them is, what did they take away from the Super Bowl? What did they learn from the Super Bowl? Because the reality of this is some of the scheme, some of the execution, everything combined cost them from getting a 3-peat. And you can't just think, well, hey, it's a tough year, we'll go back and do it again. A 3-peat, you got to start from scratch all over again. It's a completely different mountain you're climbing than just trying to, win year to year. So, I mean, you're going to have all the stars align again to be able to win 2 Super Bowls just to try to get to the 3rd. It's rare air and rare opportunity, and a lot of things got to go right to be able to get to 3. So, in something like that, after you lose in the way that they did to the Eagles, in my opinion, there's a lot of soul searching that has to happen about what, in terms of what they as position coaches could or couldn't do. What did they learn from that? What did they learn that they're going to approach differently from it? Whether that's a practice, whether that's how they do something in a meeting room, what did they take away from that is going to make it different for them than what the Eagles were able to predict that they were going to do and cause them a ton of problems. And so that's why I asked Joe Blameyer what I did, and that's why I asked Andy Heck what I did, is because this is the first time we talked to him since the Super Bowl. And so something else that kind of grinded my gears, I'm going to say, from being at the presser, is we can talk about the deep pass, or we can ask questions about the deep pass all we want and everything, but your offensive line and the timing that Mahomes has will determine if you can throw the ball down the field and how much of the play can be executed no matter what. Because in the Philadelphia Eagles game, because of the lack of time with the offensive line, there's not a lot you could be able to throw deep at various points. So until you've asked Andy Heck enough questions about how they're going to fix that, how that's going to work, then you've already eliminated, it doesn't matter if you want to throw it deep or not. There's a lot of times last year the Chiefs, coaching staff probably did want to throw it deep, but they didn't have timing because of the pressure at that point. So that's step 1. And step 2 is, do you have an explosive running back and a reliable run game in the backfield that brings that other safety down so you can throw over top quicker? Those are the 2 things you need to have before you can really push the ball down the football field, because of how often teams are keeping 2 safeties back. So, I mean, I get that was a question that seemed to be asked a lot during the presser, but from a foundational perspective, those are the 2 things that I was kind of curious to hear more about, but I can only get my one question in to be able to, and I got the shake off on Nagy whenever I put the hand up back there, because I give respect to the beat writers to ask their questions first. Then I'm at that point where when we have 7 people and we're trying to keep a certain time and efficiency, where I'm back there like, hey. And I'm in a tight camera quarters, so I have to kind of weave around so that I can get a clear line of sight, so whoever's doing PR can see that yes, I do have a question and I would like to ask it. And so I was at least able to ask Blameyer and Andy Heck those, and were they the answers I was hoping for? Not really, but I understand there's certain information they have to protect, but I like to give them the opportunity to be able to say whatever they can or feel comfortable with in a public setting to be able to give the fans and media what insight they can without giving the rest of the NFL the answer.
Yeah, I mean, I give Andy Hex credit in the fact that he did acknowledge the fact that needed to be acknowledged, that the offensive line got its butt kicked that day. It's just, we'll need some more time to flesh out the answers. He was also the last coach after a long period, so there was also a little bit of rushing him out at the end. And that I seriously, I don't think that was as much about trying to get Andy Heck off the podium as it was just we had been, because they also threw in Dustin Colquitt in there. So we'd been with, it was an hour and 20 minutes that press conference ran, and the Chiefs never do an hour and 20 minutes of press conferences. So
in an ideal world, no, they don't. No, they don't have 7 people at the podium like that, or 8. So, it was 8 total, I think, 7 or 8.
Yeah, it's good. So it's going to take us some time, and we'll get Heck again at training camp, and just to flesh out exactly, hey, why did you get your butts kicked, and what are you doing to fix it? And that's where I don't think we got much of a good answer, like you said, on Wednesday. So there will still be more work to do in that topic. There's a lot of things that I thought were of note, but I always totally appreciate Dave Tobe's brutal honesty when it comes to just who's doing what and what the battles are, because let's face it, everything except kicker is up for grabs in special teams. He was asked whether or not Eddie, I'm trying to work on this, Nit. Chaplitsky, I think is how you actually pronounce it. I've been pronouncing it apparently incorrectly. Even his own teammates back in college couldn't pronounce it correctly from a YouTube video, so I have that going for me. But he was asked if he's a real challenge for Matt Araiza, and yeah, he is. I mean, it's going to be interesting to me because he mentioned like Ryan Reckow last year. Remember the Chiefs didn't even take Reckow to training camp. They had him in with Araiza competing for the job, and then once OTAs were done, they just moved on and handed the job to Araiza. It'll be interesting to see if they go ahead and take him to camp to keep this battle going, because they clearly want to push Matt Araiza. That's one abundantly clear from what Tobe said on Wednesday. But also just talking about the kick return and the punt return jobs. Nico Remigio's got a leg up, but that doesn't mean he's going to win both those jobs. And Brashard Smith is going to factor in both. There was a little bit of revisionist history, Nick, when he was talking about punt returners, because he was talking about Xavier Worthy, being factored into the punt return, and that was the plan last year. And this is where the revisionist history or just misremembering came in, because he mentioned that after Rashee Rice got hurt, that took all the equation about Xavier Worthy. Well, they already had McCole Hardman returning punts before that. So it was really more the Hollywood Brown injury that I think really pushed them out of having Xavier Worthy returning punts. But I don't see any evidence that they're going to do it this year, because Xavier Worthy is going to be one of their top 3 receivers. I just don't see it this year either, but they've got a lot of other candidates that could, and it's going to be an interesting job to watch in training camp, because it won't be just Remigio. Brashard Smith will be in there. I mean, that's the best way for Sky Moore to make this team, is to prove himself indispensable on returns. I just don't know if it's going to happen. Noel Williams can return kicks. We'll see. There'll be some other options in there, but Remigio is reliable, and if he makes the team, it's going to be as a return specialist.
Yeah, another thing I do want to mention, people may have been waiting for, is Josh Simmons out there during practice. I mean, doing a little bit more work than he did the week before, which is great to see. Again, I want to tell you, athletically, I really like where he's at in terms of his ability to kind of work in space, kind of be able to pull. If he needs to get out on a screen, the ability he has there, the comfort level that he seems to be having with his kick step, and with all that combined, and the way he was out there at working against some other guys and everything. Him and Rice are further along than where we both probably anticipated they would be. So that's encouraging on that front. Obviously, until the pads come on, you may hear that elsewhere, but this is where it originated from. You won't be able to kind of tell from a technique perspective on some things, but like just in terms of where his knee is at, there's a lot of promise with where Josh Simmons is at and how quickly he's been able to recover and respond from what was probably an insanely terrifying day for him in Oregon whenever the injury occurred.
Indeed. Any final thoughts? Because I think we've wrapped up everything that's been on my brain.
That was my primarily final thought. Yeah, so we'll see of what we've put out there, what'll end up elsewhere, and see where it gets aggregated and go from there.
Still no spiders?
No, and we can move on with our lives from that. We can personally never talk about it again.
All right, so long, spider.
Yes, Matt. You got any final things here?
Guess my only final thought would be to say I got the Tuesday night Q&A. We'll discuss everything. Final OTA is that we'll be able to see is on Thursday, so we'll come back and recap everything for you on Sunday. And 41 is the mic as usual. So a pretty normal week of football ahead for us, Nick.
That's right, Matt. So I bid you adieu.
You've been listening to 41 is the Mic, presented by KSHP 41, your home of the Chiefs and Chiefs Digest.